Hello everyone and welcome to Career Development and Mastering the Interview, a free short course facilitated by IT Masters and Charles Sturt University, or CSU. My name is Guy and I'll be your MC during this course for the next 4 weeks, which is coordinated and presented by John Price. All webinars for this course will be held at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. But before handing over to John, I think an introduction to both IT Masters and the CSU is in order, as well as just a bit of housekeeping. So you might be wondering who are IT Masters and CSU if this is your first course, and why we run these courses for free. IT Masters is a training organisation that exists almost exclusively as a partner to CSU. We work with CSU to create and deliver a number of their Masters courses. We also market these courses on their behalf, and we think that the best way to do that is to give some of it away for free. And if we do a good enough job, we hope that some of you students will enroll in the full Masters course. That said, this 4-lecture course stands alone in its own right. We want you to learn some useful information, have some fun, and hopefully make connections with your fellow students in the forums and maybe elsewhere as well. If you pass the exam at the end, you'll earn a certificate of achievement, and we don't expect you all to come and sign up for the Master's degree at the end of the course. If you come away thinking that CSU is a university that's doing some good things and you appreciated the course, then for us it's a win-win situation. On hand tonight we have James in a technical support role from IT Masters. He's here just in case there are any technical issues. We're actually experiencing a couple right now which he's working on rapidly, so lucky I'm talking too much. He's also responsible for the learn.itmasters.edu.au website, which is the course website where all of the content is. You'll find all the other materials needed for this course, readings, discussion forums, homework, information as well, all on that page. So I'll paste that into the chat section in a moment. If you have any questions tonight or later on, please feel free to contact us using the details provided on that page, learn.itmasters.edu. So I'll shortly introduce your mentor for the next 4 weeks, but just quickly a word on the GoToWebinar functionality if this is your first course with us. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment during the lectures, you can do so using the chat function as Jason was alluding to. And we really strongly encourage you to join the discussion, as they say, as it really does improve the course quality, I think. Your perspectives and insights or requests for clarification make for a collaborative learning environment, which is something that we really do hope to provide. Myself or Neil or James will try and answer as many of your questions as possible in the chat box, where you'll see it if we respond, or if they're particularly relevant to the presentation and relevant to John, we'll periodically have question and answer sessions throughout the lecture. But that's enough out of me. Please welcome John Price. John has had a distinguished career over more than 30 years in people assessment and development, mostly within the IT, digital media and telecommunications industries. He's been a business owner, he's been associated with more associations and institutions than you can shake a stick at, and is a lovely man to boot. So please welcome John over the phone. We're having a few technical issues, but we'll struggle through for this first week, I think.
Well, good evening, everyone, and just one for you, Guy. Can you now see my screen?
Not as yet. We'll make you presenter right now.
Can you see my screen now?
We cannot. No. Perhaps does anyone else? Ah, there we go. Very good. Now we can.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
Well, look, good evening, everybody, and well done getting here on time, and well done, I guess, in putting a priority on where your career planning is and mastering in the interview. You know, from talking with a range of people who were interested in this subject, we gathered that the emphasis was going to be on mastering the interview. And when I use the words mastering the interview, I'm referring here to really understanding how the interview works, both from a process point of view and from a psychological perspective. And what I'm attempting to do with you is to build that piece by piece, getting to the interview at the end, but start with the career planning. And so, because we only have 4 sessions, you have to appreciate that this is a rapid pace summary. It's really hopefully an aid memoir for you to be able to refer back to it just when you need it. Now, I've got some objectives that I've set, and I'd like to share those with you because at the end they'll be my marker. So if you like, these are my goals that I have. You know, I want you to be able to reflect in your career to date. Perhaps even have the opportunity to reset goals and determine an action plan. Even maybe in certain circumstances, self-coach. I want you to be able to broaden your horizons on the job market, or necessarily influencing those internally about roles that may be in the company, and maybe even those that are seeking or currently in self-employment. Having been in self-employment and worked for others over the years, you know, there's some pretty significant mindset changes that need to take place there. I particularly want you to gain a much clearer view of your strengths, and when I say strengths, I'm talking about character strengths, which I will define. Those character strengths are really important when you're out in the interview market, be it internally or otherwise, because they give you confidence to take a project approach in seeking those, I guess, impressing the interviewer, the depth of you beyond what your experience states you have done by way of skills. You know, people say sometimes people are recruited based on their competencies and skills, and they're fired based on their attitude and communication skills. Well, we want to bundle all that together. We want to be able to have a demonstration of skills, but also a great demonstration of interpersonal capability. And we have a methodology to help you practice in your own space. The objective that we have in this program is for it, to the extent that it's possible in a webinar environment, we want it to be interactive. We want you as adult learners to do as you do best, and that is learn by experience. We start off with thinking about our career plan. You know, in life we like to think in most of the things we do that we have a plan that we set out to achieve something. And yet, so often when I speak to executives and the people that I've interviewed, employed, given career coaching to, I've observed that many really spend less time on career planning than they actually do on perhaps buying their next mobile phone. And yet, career planning can set the whole basis, not necessarily for a plan to continue on that specific direct line, but to be a reference point to look back on and say, well, how am I going and what's the reality? Because I know that there will be, and you can see the little cobweb at the bottom, I know there will be many things that will take place. I only got to look at my own career, and I think in terms of how I got to running my own business, and it's a cobweb of who I met and yet what basic competencies did I have to start with. I'm also interested in terms of, as we build the plan, being realistic and knowing how do others actually, in the decision-making positions, how do they rate us? You know, it's all very well for me to have an opinion about my capabilities and what I ought to be doing in my career, but how do those in the key roles that assess me, how do they rate me? And how can I influence that rating over time? And where are the priorities? Life's a big thing. For some people, careers are far more important by way of achievement, by way of the satisfaction of achieving through ambition than for others. I have friends who have, whilst in the IT industry, split careers. One particular friend who is an artist, who for years has been in some form of IT support on a part-time basis because he happened to form his priorities in a particular way. And let's think about, has the career so far been random? Has it been planned? Or is it a mixture? And where does the unplanned and the spontaneous fit in? Into that cobweb of careers. Through the course of these slides, for those of you who are students of the most effective and best training there is on presenting slides, I'm breaking all of that. Because instead of having nice 3 or 4 key points, only on a slide, all of the same font, all of the same color, etc., etc. I want these slides to be a compendium, as I said in the beginning, an aid memoir for you, that you can actually see sentences that will remind you of points. So please understand. I mentioned the cobweb of careers. You know, if we start off with a plan, and let's face it, many of us, and I don't know how many are actually in the group of ages, we'll check that polling out in just a minute. Hugh, Guy will actually do that. But very few people actually have a specific, defined career goal plan right in the beginning. I've certainly met army officers, I've met doctors, I've met scientists who had a very clear role in their mind, a very clear span, and that's what they did, and that's what they're still doing 25 years later. But for a lot of us, the planned route can get interrupted, and it can be interrupted by who we meet, circumstances that take place. But the real question I want to pose for you, and if you're taking notes, please write this down. The real question I'd like to pose for you is that where I want to be when I get the opportunity? Because I've met many, many executives. Some of them I've counseled to stay in the organization that they're in. Many, many executives who, because their ego was appealed to when they were offered a job externally, they dashed into it and realized that they hadn't actually thought about the next job after that. So let's go back here a second. And Guy, do you mind if we do a poll? I'd just be really interested to see, and as part of our interactivity, I'd be really interested to see, you know, what is the mixture of folks, particularly those of you, the 159 or so that are there right now, those that will see this later on, just where you fit in the spectrum of management experience so far. Just give me a feeling so I know I can talk to and give examples for different parts of the audience. Do you think we could run that, please, Guy?
Sure. We'll start it now, and it should be available on everyone's screen. And we'll keep it up there for about 30 seconds to a minute. We'll wait until we get a good chunk of people voting, and we've got 50% voted so far.
Do I get to see this?
You will soon. If not, if you can't see it, I'll be able to talk to you. We've got roughly 30% so far in a management role and 50% not. 20% hoping to be or planning to be.
Okay.
I'll just give another 10 seconds or so. So you should all be able to see the results now. 27% yes, 52 no, and 20 no but planning to be soon. John?
20 planning to be soon.
And I'll now put the slides
One
back
more
up.
poll if I could.
Oh yeah, sure.
One more poll. And this would just, I hope you don't mind, folks, that we just collect a little bit of this. This is, you know, totally anonymous, of course. I wonder if we could just have a look at the age distribution across the span here, because I happen to know that there are a number of people on this call who are at the more mature end. They're up there with me, sort of thing, in terms of age. And there is some very significant strategies for older executives who, for whatever reason, are either wanting to make a complete change or have been displaced, and in a sense are revisiting the whole question of career planning. Would you mind running that, please, Guy?
Sure, that one's shared, and we've got most people voting already, so I'll only leave that up for another few seconds. Of course, your age bracket must be 41 to 50, John.
How sweet of you. Remind me to buy you a drink when we next meet.
Sure. Alrighty, I'll close this one now and share it. And we've got only 8% under 25, 42, 26 to 40, 23%, 41 to 50, and 26%, 51 plus.
Just give me those again because I don't have it on the screen.
Sure. 8% under 25,
Mm-hmm.
42% aged 26 to 40, 23% aged 41 to 50, and 26% 51 plus.
26%. That's a great distribution. Fantastic distribution.
I'd like to see more under 25s, but that's all right.
Yeah, but let's face it, we've got a lot of people here who somewhere have been considering a master's program, and therefore, there's an orientation towards how do I reposition myself in my career? Let me move on.
Yeah,
So
good point.
there's many career directions, and we can follow that direction, but deciding which one and for how long, it's valuable at least, I think. Bear in mind this is the John Price perspective on life. I think it's valuable to consider our whole of life position. We can't really position and partition careers and work priorities totally in isolation because we have so many other influences: families, friends, sports, hobbies, and, as we'll talk about down the track, where we might fit into the spectrum of where we sit in perhaps Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which we'll cover further. So to do that, let's have a look at one way of considering where we sit in our life. And what I'd like you to do is just bear with me on this for a moment. Martin Seligman, who introduced positive psychology, and by the way, regretted the fact that the word happiness was ever associated with this, because he then found people talking about being happy, and that wasn't quite what he had in mind. He really wanted to really emphasize more meaning as part of happiness. So he came up with this quadrant of our positive emotions, how engaged we are, what's the relationship quality in our lives, how much meaning is in our life, and what do we define as meaning? For some, meaning might be how well I hit a golf ball, and for others it might be how well I perform voluntary activities to some particular location. It doesn't matter, but whatever, is there a meaning? Because everything is individually prioritized. And what are my accomplishments? So if you think in terms of that, and it's a very interesting thing for those of you in management, of which there's a good number, when we're sitting down with our key members and our aspiring members of staff, just to run that filter across them. Just look to yourself, what are the positive emotions I'm seeing? How engaged are they in their work? What's the quality of their relationships, even in the organization? How much meaning do they have in what they're doing? And what's their accomplishments? And then that can help you before you start providing advice. But in the wheel of life, let's face it, we have many aspects. We have health and fitness. We have relationships outside of our direct family. We have our work ambitions and our career. We may have community and voluntary work. We have perhaps a partner and our family life. We have hobbies. And for some, there's a spiritual component, and there's a sense of, where's my legacy? Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that in the context of where we're going as far as building career, that we're looking for a balanced lifestyle at every aspect of our career. Because there will be times in our life when we actually prioritize our work situation so much that some other aspects in the whole of life spectrum take a lesser priority. And there'll be other times when we are struggling to get a greater balance, and there'll be times when we choose to prioritize a greater balance. But it's worthwhile, in my opinion, to have this as a framework as we look at our career planning, and something to come back to, rather than living in a world of frustration and not having said, okay, I really haven't exercised as much as I would have liked to later, and maybe that's why I'm not feeling so great. You know, it'd be really good to have another dimension of my life outside of work. Maybe I could do something and contribute somewhere else. So I leave that with you as a thought, as merely a backdrop and perhaps a filter to look into the assessment beyond our life priorities of what are our personal strengths. This is the first part beyond the poll for you to do, for us to have some interactive time together. Soon you're going to see on your screen a series of photographs, and they're going to require you to form some form of judgment. You're going to make a decision about what you like and what you don't like. These photograph cards, I'm going to ask you to spend a little bit of time, and we're going to give you a bit of time. So unlike a lot of webinars where it's voice, 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 there will be some gaps, and the guy will manage that time for me. So next I want you to look at the picture cards you're about to see on your screen. Select just one card that has an immediate appeal and think about what that appeal is. Is it the visual? Is it what you can imagine the sounds associated with the picture card? Or is it some feeling that we have, you know, a kinesthetic perspective? Now write 3 positive impressions about that card, taking into consideration those 3 senses. The 3 senses are really important in our life because we will meet people in life who are very visual, and we'll meet people who basically prefer the auditory, they prefer to hear, and we'll meet a lot of other people who are driven more by their feelings, and for all of us there'll be some mixture of it. There'll be some mixture. If we know what that orientation is about ourselves and about others, it better prepares us for the way we communicate with other people, and we'll be spending a lot of time on the subject of communication. So here are the cards. 6 cards, select one, take a couple of minutes and write down 3 things about that one card that appeals to you. If you like, the strengths to you of that card. I'll leave it with you, Guy.
Just to confirm, John, did you want people to share it in the chat, or did you just want them to write them down for their own benefit?
I think this is a very private thing. I think I want them to, all the participants to, for themselves, be able to, if they want to share it, by all means, but it's certainly not mandatory.
Thanks. I've actually had the opportunity to look at these before, thanks to a couple of rehearsals with John, and I think I like the last 2, the violin and the statue. I won't share my senses.
How are we going, Guy?
Yeah, what's that about? Just over a minute. Perhaps if a couple of you can write in the comments when you've actually finished, or if you'd like some more time, just let us know and we'll gauge how you guys are going. Alrighty. Another 20 or 30 seconds, I think. We're getting a few people finished.
Just for me, Guy, the voice quality coming through on this is fine.
Yeah, you're sounding great. Dulcet tones. I think we'll stop there, folks, and we've had a couple of brave people share. I'll just chat about Craig. Craig's sent in lighthouse, visual symmetry, calming blue sky, feeling of strength and stability.
Excellent.
Alrighty, we might just jump back in.
So, I'd like to congratulate you all because I know, having run many workshops where a similar exercise was run, that everybody is very good at being able to describe, if you like, the strengths of what they see in that card. You know, we look at the card. Let me go back to one. Let's take the lighthouse that Craig shared with us. You know, we see the strength of that building. You know, we see the blue sky. It perhaps brings back a memory to us when we were sailing down the coast and we saw a lighthouse on the hill. Or if we chose the violinist, you know, we can remember when we traveled to Europe that there was this wonderful small orchestra and you were spellbound sitting as you sipped on your coffee. Or the rattling sound of the motor vehicles in the Grand Prix, which this is not quite, but you know what I mean. Or at some stage of our life there was a crossroads, and I could relate to that. You know, one can relate to that emotionally. Maybe there's a crossroads that we have right now in terms of our career. And as I say, you've all described that in your own minds extremely well, I'm sure. Where I want to take that is to say it's easy to do it when we see cards like that because it's not us. But what is it like when we're in a job interview or when we're being assessed by our internal management or when we're trying to influence a decision in life in our work environment? How do we draw on our own personal strengths and how do we describe them to someone else? What are the important characteristics to emphasize? And when I emphasize them, what's the context of the situation? Because it'll be different if I'm in a business project meeting and I'm trying to impact a decision, influence a decision, versus when I'm in a job interview. I'm choosing character strengths to show you an example of shortly as a fundamental way that when we get to the interview phase of these webinars, a fundamental way where you can shift the perspective of an interviewer up by multiple notches as they appreciate the strengths that you bring to the achievements that you've made and that you are outlining to them when you're answering a question. How do you express them? So here's a set of character strengths. This is only an example. It comes from a organization, VIA. You'll find them if you want to look at this later on the VIA website. I have no financial or business relationship with these people, but I did look at this very closely when I was doing my master's, which I did as a mature age student, by the way, to bring myself right up to date with the research prior to doing more executive and corporate coaching. Down there is a list. And if you go onto that site, you'll get the opportunity to do a free little test. They'll also give you a couple of options to do some paid ones. You don't need to do that. You can if you wish. I've just printed them all out here for you to have a look. But have a quick look down that list. Have a look down the list and ask yourself the question, which ones relate to me mostly? Which ones have other people said about me? Which ones do you think I've got case studies on that I could tell other people? Which ones just work naturally for me? And which ones have I needed to work on? Now, I'd like you to quickly write down two of your character strengths that immediately come to mind. You'll have the opportunity of completing this self-analysis when we do the homework and go into the VIA site. But right for now, I just want you to write down two. And then I'll talk about how do we express them. I'll give you that screen again. And just select two, and Guy, I think a couple of minutes on this.
Sure. Then I might chuck in a question as well. We've got an interesting question that came in a few minutes ago. What about you, John? What would you think are your strengths? If you don't mind my asking.
I think teamwork.
Definitely humility. Mine's certainly humility.
I'd like to think judgment. I'd also like to think gratitude, and certainly zest. And hopefully over the years I've been able to demonstrate perseverance, and some may judge that I have some social intelligence.
Rightio, if there's anyone still going, we might just ask the question now, John. I think it pertains to the meanings, like there's the circle of that circle of the from a few slides ago, and Anoop's been wondering when the world is becoming a village, and I think that's a beautiful phrase. How does one manage meaning? How does one, I guess, ascribe meaning? It's a philosophical question, and he's posing a difficult one.
Who was that asked that? That
was Anoop.
Anoop.
He's a regular on these short courses.
And you know, Anoop, I'd encourage you to do some research about meaning. There's so much material written about meaning in itself because it's such an individual thing. And sometimes even testing it with the closest of our friends in terms of, you know, if you look at my life, you know, what do you see I'm gaining meaning from? And then you answer that question to yourself, because what you might see as meaning and what I see as meaning may be two different things. I notice, for example, the way people treat retirement and where they put their energies as quite different. But far be it for me to judge whether another individual is getting meaning just because they're doing different things and spending different amounts of time in matters that I'm not. Hopefully that helps you. Can I move on, Guy?
Sure.
One more question. Is there another question?
We got a couple of... no, just a couple of comments. We had a comment from Levi. What about loyalty in the character strings? By no means is this an exhaustive list, I would think.
Exactly. This is one list, and that's why I use the expression it is a list. I think loyalty is a wonderful strength to have, and by all means add it to your portfolio.
Got some great comments coming in, but we might have to keep going.
All right, up to you. Happy to take one more.
Okay, what does app of beauty / EXC mean? I imagine it's appreciation of beauty, but EXC has got me blown.
Yeah, application, you know, appreciation of beauty, and you know, I guess it means, you know, how does that get executed? I don't know quite what the EXC means either, but you know, some people can see beauty, and sometimes that can be beauty in the depth of an individual that's different to the external persona or external surrounds that you might see in an individual. They can see characteristics there that some others can't. so often, you know, two people looking across at the ocean.
Yeah.
Huh? Two people looking across at the ocean. One says, "Oh, it's breathless.
All right.
I feel." Hello. Yeah, it's breathless. I feel so relaxed. The other person says, "Gosh, it's cool, isn't it?" Can I move on, Guy? Hello, Guy. Hello, Guy.
Sorry, John, it's James here. It seems we might have lost Guy for a moment here, but I'll fill in and say, sure, sounds good.
Okay. We regard teamwork as a real strength in this group, by the way, folks, so well done, James. I don't know whether I've got, I don't think so. I've got a private call coming through. Could it be Jay? He'd call you, wouldn't he? I'm going to ignore it. Okay. So, you've written down your character strengths, and I said you'll have the opportunity of incorporating this later. Just so you know where this is all going. Just so you know where this is all going. I want you to imagine a conversation down the track where you're explaining to someone what your experience is, but you're blending character strengths and showing how those character strengths apply. You know, if you're being assessed by senior management or if you're applying for an internal or external position, and I've just given an example that I pulled out of the air. You know, in response to the question about accomplishments, the person says it was a team effort to meet the timeline. And I think that the group communication I applied and persevered with, and the delegation of key tasks to those I knew had the experience, you know, reinforced that, you know, I had the judgment on this occasion. And of course, our team's joint commitment to the task was what really saw us through at the end. Now, you're the interviewer. You're the interviewer, and the person intertwines the experience. It was a team effort to meet the timeline. So that was the accomplishment. They met the timeline. And the individual who's doing the assessment may be interested in that, of course. But how did you get there is another. So I picked a simple example that you could perhaps ponder on and think, what would that say to me? In particular, if I was asked a question of, for example, how did you manage to get that timeline achieved on a major project? But at the same time, you know, whether we have abilities and strengths, as we all know, it doesn't automatically lead us to great career opportunity. I mean, if we have a look at the leaders that we have, here we go, back here a bit. If we have a look at a case study here, where we're blending character strengths, let's look at an example. I'll move on past this slide. I've said to you, we noticed the character strengths. I'm giving an example of those again, showing you those on the screen again. And now let's look at a case study. So here's a case study of Martha. And I want you to think about this in the sense that this is a pretty practical sort of example that you might find of an executive in our industry. You know, Martha's got a computer science degree, and the focus was on project management. She built a reputation of under-promising and delivering above expectations. She was respected for her work ethic and soothing conflict situations. Her boss moved to another company because he was so confident in her. He offered her a move to manage a very large strategic project with a mix of onshore and offshore resources. So she travelled to the offshore partner's head office and learned by research with others the risk aspects. However, in the first stage of the project, it was 2 months late in delivery due to rework requirements. She was devastated, really, because she had been used to being rated at like 9 out of 10, and all of a sudden she's getting a rating of 6, far less than she'd been accustomed. But her strengths, I guess her intuition, she learnt from the experience, and she brought the next project stage in on time. But she realised that there were gaps. She realised that she'd managed to pull that off, but there were gaps. And so there were gaps in her financial, her HR, if you like, her people management, and her general management knowledge, which if she had, would propel her more in her career, but it would equip her better for such major projects. So she rolled in an MBA structured program for IT executives. She sought out a mentor. I'll cover mentors. Very important thing to do. She sought out a mentor who encouraged her to seek a meeting with her boss and the HR director so she could explain her motivations for doing the studies. This impressed them. This impressed them because they could see where her life goals were linked with her business and career goals. Subsequently, she was invited to join a committee leading the digital strategy for the board. So I posed this case study to you and ask you, can you just write down 2 observations about Martha's career to date in terms of what were the drivers and the results? What were the features that were, if you like, the building blocks that she could put towards the elevation of her career? James, you're in the chair now. If I could just ask you to manage the time on this just for a couple of minutes, if you would.
Yep, that's fine. Unless Guy is here. Are you back with us, Guy?
I sure am. Sorry for that.
Good to hear. No worries.
This is like tag team, James.
Oh, collaborative learning.
Yeah, collaborative learning and spontaneity on the run. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. Got to move quickly, John.
So 2 observations we're looking for, Guy, and see what comments you get.
Yeah, would you mind providing just an example for those that might be struggling?
But I'd just like people to have a couple of minutes just for them to write a couple of observations. And
yep.
You know, it's difficult, folks, in terms of moving a practical workshop environment into the webinar. I'm trying to give you as much opportunity for this to be interactive as we possibly can. I know I learn better this way. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, Martha had a strong start to her career. You know, she established a solid track record, which was built on a sound academic history. A very important factor, she managed to gain the trust of her manager. Going back to the cobweb of career, this wasn't planned, but out of the blue, her manager is now moved, offers her a role. She is complimented, and perhaps he touches on a slight, say, area of her self-development because she perhaps wasn't mapping that against her career plan. So she had her first real taste of failure. Now, that could be actually a good thing because, let's face it, failure is a question of degree and it's a question of so what in some cases if it brings out the character strengths, in this case resilience. And she had the, I'd call it, I guess, street smarts, or it's referred to differently on the VIA.me site. She had the insight to engage a mentor. And that's, if you like, was creative. See, she learnt from her mistakes and she recovered. And then she recognized that in order to move back to her career plan, she needed some general management training and enrolled in a master's program. So, hopefully you can see how the character strengths fit in, because some people will look at this and say, sorry, I just don't get it. I just don't, it's all about abilities and what's my track record and, you know, what were the positions that I held. And yet, when they're interviewing and they choose one person out of a shortlist and they present that person to the decision maker, quite often they're not talking about the fact that they just did this and they just did that. They're talking about the fact that we could rely on the fact that no matter what situation that person's placed in, they'll demonstrate resilience. They'll come out, they'll look outside of the 9 dots. They'll learn from their experiences and they'll seek further learning. I hope that makes sense. You know, I can't go further in talking about career development without talking about personalities and behaviour. You know, I thought about this long and hard, and initially I wasn't going to include this, but when I think about it, you know, no matter where we look in our career, we are influenced by the people that are around us. Isn't that so? We're influenced by the people that are around us. And sometimes we struggle with the behaviour of some people because we can't understand quite why they don't see the things we see. And that's because we're complex. In our personalities, we lie on a spectrum. Some organisations, for example, are recruiting people who have a degree of autism. And they're doing that both to help those people get an edge in the market, but they're also doing because actually some of the characteristics of autism can be, if they're on a minor spectrum, can be very valuable in terms of focus, in terms of detail, in terms of staying in one issue. So why I'm mentioning this is that I encourage you in the context of career building, because we haven't got time in this. I'd love to spend hours with you on personalities and talk about a whole range of different personalities. I mean, right at the moment in the public media, there's a lot being talked about narcissism. It's an interesting case study. You will have come across managers and people in your life and in business, and you will say, there's some of that narcissistic arrogance, focus on themselves, focus regardless, you know. If you're with me, I love you. If you're not with me, I hate you. So I encourage you, in the context of career building, to become students of individual differences and learn that our personalities lie on a spectrum and that we are complex. Focus on empathy rather than judgment, but learn on how to work with the differences. You know, good people developers will build, subject to the situation, complementary teams with mixture of personalities and, of course, skills, which embrace the creative, the practical, logical, rational thinking, feeling, introvert, extrovert, because good leaders know that you need that complementation in a group, because if you don't do that, you get things like groupthink and you don't get that creative input. So by demonstrating understanding of human behaviour and how to bring out the best in individuals as well as teams, that group of people who are here tonight who are aspiring to management roles, I'll put to you that if you are demonstrating by the language that you use that you understand human behaviour, that you are interested in individual differences and you want to build complementary teams, you will stand out, because it's a known that good leaders are good with people. And yes, there are examples of leaders I've met leaders of companies who, you know, are dramatically not good with leaders, but they build around them a particular group of people, and it's brittle when management changes. I'd like you to next week have, for your own benefit, but bring to the session a case study on how you built and how you worked with a mixed personality team. I'm sure you've got dozens and dozens of examples, But I'd like you to actually put pen to paper if you would. Let's move on. You know, it can be a bit frustrating at times when we look at those that have got top jobs and say to ourselves, you know, how really competent are they? How did they get to where they got? And sometimes you think it was political. Sometimes you think, you know, they really didn't understand this person when they put them in the role. And sometimes it's just that you notice that beyond their ability in the job, they had good presentation skills. They led by example. They were effective delegators. You know, in order to be an effective delegator, one has to understand, are able to actually recognize those competencies and are prepared to delegate. And we demonstrate to those that are judging us our capacity to delegate and delegate effectively, which means that we still keep our eye on it. Maybe that's what you see in the leaders that you have. Do they support the organizations, but they also balance it with support for the individuals? Did they have the support of senior management? Getting back to what I said, you know, how do people rate us? Did senior management support them? Had they networked widely? Were they politically astute? And did they form alliances? You know, we see the dramatic circumstances in coalition governments around the world and in our circumstances in Australia. But coalitions are rife around the world. And you see forming alliances in those extreme examples. But forming alliances inside organizations is what politically astute people do. And was their personality suited to the business and the culture? You know, if there's an emergency on, if there's something that has to be achieved in a very short period of time and the pressure's on, then there is less time for the collaborative approach. It is more do as I say approach that works. So it has to be situationally based as to what strengths work in what situations. I think you'll agree that when we look at politics, mostly it has an impact on most senior positions. I know in the military, you could say, for example, beyond the rank of lieutenant colonel, most of the appointments are appointed politically. And you've seen, of course, what happens in the government in the US, and you'll see it happen to a degree in our public service. But generally, you know, ability and competency on the job, you know, it's a combination of implementing that strategic career plan, taking the opportunities when we see them come along, if we can reference them back to the career plan. Are we liked by people? And I don't mean that in the sense of being obsequious or fawning, but I mean in terms of, you know, do we have a cadre of people who respect us? Perhaps a better word than like. And what can we do for them? You know, what are we doing to help them in their careers or achieve their objectives? And let's face it, a bit of good fortune and a bit of good timing, force of personality and excellent interpersonal skills, including what we can summarize in this series of webinars. So in terms of career focus outside of our ability and contacts, in the main, good talent will be noticed. I think of examples of people. I'll give you one example. I met him when he was doing a vocational course, and many years ago. And I was asked to give him some advice. He moved from that vocational course to another, and he got a role with a couple of different organizations and eventually moved to a role in a bank. He was very competent with people, and he was a very good delegator, and he knew how to make decisions. But he did it collaboratively with people, and this was noticed. But he was being held back a little bit in terms of the perception that he didn't have any tertiary qualifications to speak of. So he went off and he did a master's program. Took him a while because he was working crazy hours. Today he holds one of the most senior IT management roles in one of the major four banks in Australia. Good talent will be noticed. And of course there will be personality clashes. We've all met people, and maybe experienced it ourselves, where personality clashes have actually prevented careers moving as fast as they could. A friend of mine suffered that very much so, and the only solution for him was to move companies because he wasn't going to go far further in the company that he was in. And there's matters to do with the economy. I mean, the GFC, for example, the fact that one's not networking well, you know, the associations being involved in the Australian Computer Society, or the computer societies around the world, wherever you're calling in from, networking with commerce groups, and of course people's limited capacity to present ideas, unable to recognize the internal politics, and sometimes unrealistic ambition. So when we, in the creation of clear, realistic but challenging goals, and we've got commitment to their implementation, we also may need to make rapid adjustment if the circumstances change. So we've got the cobweb of career, we've got the career planning, but something happens out of the blue. So a well-planned executive, a well-planned IT career person, or a general management prospect will have a plan B. And through it all, we need to stay positive, and we need to continue to grow. And I put it to you, there's an advantage in having a mentor, but how do we do it? And I'm sorry, folks, that there's a lot of words coming out from me at the moment and not so much interactivity. As we move through the webinar programs, I promise you the interactivity will be there. Finding a mentor. You know, there's some organisations, and many medium to large organisations, that have as a stated policy the appointment of internal mentors. You may work for one currently. And then the question is really, is that mentor right for you? And finding one's own mentor is easier than you think. You know, if you're networking and you observe individuals and experience that's relevant to you and where you want to go, they're the people that you want to actually have as your mentor, not just somebody that you get on with. It's a bit like the old subject, you know, if I want to get advice on a particular subject, unless it's just to get a personal view based on somebody knowing me really well, I want to go to somebody who's got the knowledge and the experience before. Because, you know, it's a compliment to be asked to be a mentor. I've been asked to be a mentor many times, and it's a compliment. You know, one feels good, or many people would feel good about being asked to be a mentor, and so you'd be surprised how easy it is to recruit a mentor. And sometimes it can be as easy as saying, I've noticed your career, I've noticed how well you've done, and I've noticed the places that you've done it in. I'm trying to build my career plan now, and I'd be really grateful if I could get your input. I wonder if we could meet sometime. I wonder if I could buy you a coffee or a tea, whatever it may be. And it doesn't have to be hugely time-consuming on the part of the mentor, because the mentor you're wanting to, unlike a coach per se, a mentor you're wanting somebody to share their experience with you and is not afraid to share their experience with you. So, it's not all about politics. Some people, you know, some disgruntled executives I've met complain about promotion being driven by politics, particularly at the top. But what do you think? You know, what have you observed? You know, those that have intelligence on the organization, I use the word intelligence in a military context, internal intelligence, that they are informal influencers on the organization. They can influence the organization without positional power. That they can see the hidden cues that come along. Do you have a following? Do you have an internal group that follow you without you actually having mandate over there as manager? Others that come to you for advice? Non-positional power, sometimes developed most effectively by working in a voluntary organisation in addition to one's work, where one doesn't have any positional power. I certainly found that in my years, the Australian Information Industry Association and through the ACS Foundation, a great organisation. I'd recommend to you, and many of you, a lot of the things I'm saying to you, I am fully cognizant that for most people, you'll say, I know that. But you know what? Sometimes in life we have to be reminded if we want to go forward. So I'd encourage you to read up on organisational network analysis. Understand that there are people in organisations that have non-positional power, and if one can influence them, one can find out a lot about what's happening in the organisation if one needs to. And also, as I mentioned, voluntary work. You know, one of the big factors in selecting senior management is looking at the breadth of the individual. Have they demonstrated their capacities outside of just working in the organisation? Are they involved in internal committees? Have they put themselves out? Are they involved in social activities? Are they mentoring others? Because believe it or not, even if you're in that younger group here tonight, there'll be people younger than you that you can mentor, and there'll be those older who will seek your mentoring if you have specific skills. And do you show achievement for others? In other words, you're not worried about your ego so much. You're very happy to show the achievement and acknowledge the achievement of others, noting their strengths in front of others. It's a leadership characteristic that'll be noticed by senior management. And how do you rate your social skills? Sometimes courtesy, manners, respect for others doesn't necessarily come naturally for everyone. And if it doesn't come naturally, it'll be a factor considered in appointing or offering more senior roles in certain cultures. There are some cultures, of course, where courtesy could be viewed as a weakness. Whether you would choose to work with organisations like that is up to you. And of course, sometimes we need to just leave and find new pastures. And the judgment of doing that is one that I'll leave to you, but it's really assessing whether or not, even if you change and even if you grow and demonstrate more capability, will you be noticed and will the opportunities be there? Sometimes the channel to senior management is just so thin that it's hard to achieve. So, there we are. We've got through week one, webinar one. We've covered a lot of material, and a lot of it's quite deep. And some of you might think, hang on, when am I going to get to the nitty-gritty of interviewing? We will get there, I promise you. And when we get there, the skills that you will learn will be skills that will set you apart from most others in the interview process. But having this backdrop, being aware of your own strengths, being aware and having a career plan. Next week we're going to learn about setting some congruent goals, goals that are goals for you only, ones that you personally are satisfied with. They are not goals that others have set on you. We're going to cover in detail listening skills and how really tuned listening skills can adapt to every situation and leave a positive, authentic impression on others. I'm going to give you some steps in terms of how to recruit and identify your own mentor, and work more on the power of case studies, in particular how to use them in a resume and in an interview. And I'm going to show you how to build a resume that resonates with the reader. I'm going to show you two aspects that I have not seen in any programs to do with building resumes. Two aspects that I believe stand out and capture the attention of the reader, particularly when they're looking at a number of individuals, and particularly when they're looking to find out more about the individual really at first glance. So, this session we've looked at the Wheel of Life exercise. I'd like you to look at that again and complete the Wheel of Life exercise for yourself. Rate each one of those sections. Dismiss some of the sections if you don't think they're relevant. But what sections you select, rate where you think you're up to, 1 out of 10, 10 being the highest at this point, and where you'd like them to be in the short term and in the medium term. I'd like you to write down 2 goals you have for your career, short term and medium term. Those goals need to be realistic, they need to have options, and you need to have an execution plan that you're confident you can deliver on. And I'd really encourage you to write 2 case studies, no more than 1 type page each, drawing on your strengths that highlight an accomplishment that you've made in your career. And it doesn't have to be in the last 2 years. It can be earlier than that demonstrate your planning skills. I'm giving these an example. Your planning skills, your influencing skills, your leading others through change. It might be your strengths in delivering a project on time. It might be being able to rapidly integrate systems within an organization. Whatever you regard are your accomplishments, and I want you to remember the time that it took place and be as specific as you possibly can and name the organization. This is not for public display, by the way. This is for you only. Name the organization. Because later on, when you're in an interview, I'm going to show you how to use that to really have the interviewer sit up and take notice. I'd really like you to complete your own strengths analysis, to review the VIAME site, and perhaps just do the free analysis, and wait for it. I'd like you to bring an extra chair next week, because we're going to use 2 chairs. And, you know, if there is anyone in the group who has a physical disability, completely understand, but some mechanism whereby you can actually move from one position to another. And I'm going to show you how to make this a powerful self-learning exercise. So, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you feel that you've got a lot out of tonight. Thanks for your perseverance. Thank you very much to Guy and James. Thank you to Jason, and thank you to the rest of the team at IT Masters. And I pass back to you, Guy, to close the session, and I bid you all a really good night. Good night.
Thank you very much, John. We're getting the thank you comments flooding in as we speak. Levi's also asked, are we able to access the recorded webinar and slides? And the answer to that is yes, they will be available on the course page within the next 24 hours. So yeah, just again, I'd like to thank you all for attending. Thank James and his team for cool heads under pressure when we're experiencing technical issues. And yeah, if you do have any questions or comments, or you just want to start chatting about the content, we really very much encourage you to keep active on the posts, on the forums, I should say. Keep active posting in the forums. They're a really great environment to talk about things like upcoming interviews for Craig, or for just to, you know, get through to that detailing and explore the content. So I think we'll leave it at that. Have a lovely week, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to send us in an email. You can find all the details on the course page. But thanks very much and good night.
Good night.